Thank you, everyone, for staying to the almost the last minute. And I would like to thank Adrian and colleagues for organizing this wonderful conference. So I'm going to tell you something about a related topic to the last couple of talks on intralayer excitons. But before that, I want to begin by thanking the group, and particularly these three, Mari, who did really most of the work I'm going to show you today, and Sampat is a postdoc who helped out, and Saraprit is a graduate student. So I'm just speaking for them at this point. And also support is from National Science Foundation and the Air Force for this work. Okay, so there is really no need to introduce anything for this audience in 2D materials, but just for completeness, we have heard a lot of talks on heterostructures that are stacked vertically a lot, and most recent talks on intralayer excitons. So I'm going to continue that, but with a little bit of a twist. These kinds of heterostructures are interesting, as you heard the first talk this afternoon, because they're covalently stacked together, unlike vertically stacking with van der Waals forces. The interface becomes an interesting place to look for some interesting physics. And particularly what I'm going to focus on is if you take a monolayer and not only just stitch two different monolayers covalently in plane, what if you change the composition all the way, just from the center all the way to the edge, and twin, for example, X between 0 and 1. And those become, that kind of system becomes very interesting. I'm going to tell you something about that. And that enables twinning the energy band gap and also allows all kinds of interesting interaction with excitons. So it's a complicated system, but I'm going to try to convince you that something can be done on assignment. So the first system we studied a few years ago was something like this, which is in-plane heterostructure, where the outside is tungsten disulfide and the inner is molybdenum disulfide, and you have this interface, which is about 100 nanometer thick. And what we noticed, among other things, was that if you expose this kind of monolayer with light, photons extensively, what happens is that you would see the outer layer completely degrades within some time frame, and you would end up with only the inner being stable. And we explain this kind of phenomena by the interface. The interface tends to play this alloyed interface, protects oxidation because it's a thermodynamically stable interface that sort of protects the inner layer from degradation. This was confirmed by electron microscope images here that you see that the interface is highly alloyed. It has both tungsten and molybdenum mixed compared to the center, which is molybdenum rich, and the outer layer, which is tungsten rich. So the interface plays a role in terms of protecting the sample. So we explained it in that way. Then we also investigated how these alloyed samples behave as a function of temperature by doing, instead of photon imaging, but using electron imaging. And here is a low degree of alloying, where most of it is tungsten disulfide with a little bit of molybdenum. And the next sample is mostly still tungsten, and then you have here both mixed half and half. And if you raster scan all of these samples with electron beam for the same amount of time, what you notice is you form these holes in all cases, but the size and the number of holes tend to be smaller, and the numbers become also smaller in the one that's highly alloyed. And if you plot the size of the holes as a function of time, what you notice is for this highly alloyed sample, the slope is smaller. That means the size of the holes decrease is smaller as a function of time compared to all these other ones. So somehow this alloy also helps to protect the sample from these temperature effects. So motivated by these intriguing results, recently we went ahead and investigated even a more complex sample, which has a composition, a gradient, where the outer layer is tungsten rich and the inner layer is molybdenum rich, and all the way you change the composition from the center outward. And so you get a very complicated sample. And if you look with electron microscope, what you notice again is, as I said, the center is molybdenum rich and the edge is tungsten rich, but in the middle or anywhere between, you would see a mixture of these two. And the gradient is formed in a continuous way. And the question then is, one other thing the electron microscope found out, or we found out, is that not only that you have this mixture, but you also have these sulfur monovacancies. So there's a very high concentration of sulfur monovacancies that are proportional to the molybdenum content. So you have a large sulfur vacancy in the middle compared to the edge. But sulfur vacancies, these vacancies will play a significant role in what I'm going to tell you. So here is the question for, before that. So if you do just far-field Raman and PL measurements, what you notice is, again, the same thing. On the outer edge, you see the characteristic Raman peaks for tungsten disulfide, and then the inner one shows you the characteristic peaks for molybdenum disulfide, and in between you get the mixture. And if you stay in one of these peaks and plot as a function of distance going from the outer layer into the center, you get this tunable or intensity, Raman intensity. The same with the molybdenum side, which is smaller and then increases towards the center and then decreases backward as you go to the edge. The same with the PL. These are the three positions taken here with these colors. And you can see this tunability of the optical band gap. So if you take the just far-field PL and form this kind of hyperspectral image, you could, and then section cut these at different energies, what you would see is the spatial map of the emission. And you can see that it is sort of it captures what you see here, essentially. It increases in intensity as a function of energy. Because the band gap for tungsten disulfide is higher than the molybdenum disulfide, and that's what you see here in spatial map. So here is the interesting question. So you have this kind of atomic detail, which we can not get optically, by using electron microscope, which shows you atomically all the contents, the molybdenum, tungsten, as well as the vacancies at different places. So this is really as high resolution as you can get. Yeah? Very impressive from optics, microscopy point of view. Then what one wants to do is use what I'm doing, I'm telling you, is use a far-field diffraction limited beam and try to understand what goes on here. So it's a big challenge. So you might call it the fun part, or the challenging part is, given these kind of transition metal composition and sulfur monovacancy details that we know from electron microscope, how can you say anything meaningful by far-field spectroscopy? So so it is challenging. So the reason I'm showing you this is to show you, how challenging this is. Because every time you shine this large beam size, you kind of get an average information. And now you want to say what the exciton species are and how they decay and so on. So that is sort of the fun part. So if you do power-dependent spectroscopy at different points, here I show you 3 representative points in the middle, somewhere in between, and that's the edge. You get some spectra like this as a function of laser power. And this is common in the community. And you then try to fit this with different peaks. We use the void, pseudo-void functions, and we identify that 6 peaks can fit any of these spectra nicely. And that means that there are 6 peaks to assign for each of these spectra. Not only that, you also have to do that from the center all the way to the edge. So the first thing we did is we basically have these peaks, the integrated intensity of each of these 6 peaks as a function of excitation intensity, and plot them here. So there are essentially there are 6 peaks. So to make it easier, so we divide them into 2 components. The first 3 peaks are near the band edge. They are assigned to excitonic based transition near the band edge, and the rest 3 are coming from vacancy, this monovacancy or sulfur vacancy related excitations. So that is the first category. And so if you now plot this as a function of the PL intensity as a function of excitation intensity, you get these kinds of fits. And by using the power law, we can find these coefficients. And so for these first 3 peaks, P1, P2, P3, the fits are close to 1. K is close to 1. And that is related to, that implies that these peaks are related to free and bound excitons. And anything less than 1, which are the next 3 peaks, are coming from impurities and defect-related peaks. So, here is the same similar data for the 3 peaks, the 4 to 6 peaks, which are below the band gap. And if you plot these peaks again and fit them, the Ks are all less than 1. So this implies that this is one indication that they are not exciton related, but instead these vacancy related excitations. Okay, so with that, one can draw a table and assign. So you have this very complicated thing. So one thing I did not mention and show you, and I will not show you, is in order to assign the peaks 4 to 6, it's very complicated. They're coming from these not exciton related peaks, but with these defect related peaks, and they are, in order to assign those, we have to do density functional theory calculation, as well as compare the pristine and the pristine MOS2 and WS2 peaks. With that, one can make these assignments and come up with this very complicated looking energy diagram for the assignment. So in the center, the molybdenum rich side, we have the B excitons, A excitons, and excitons coming from these vacancy centers. In the middle, you would have more the exciton as well as these defect-centered peaks, and the edge, the exciton, and mostly from the vacancy centers. So those 6 peaks are basically assigned in that way. To investigate this further, we did temperature dependence spectroscopy. And so what you notice here is, of course, again, for the 3 points here I show, you can see as expected, the peaks shift to lower energy as you increase the temperature. And again, we did a similar kind of fit for these peaks as a function of temperature. And what we found is if you plot the peak position as a function of temperature for the first 3 peaks, peak 1, peak 2, peak 3, which are assigned as BX tone, AX tone, and this vacancy center peak for the center molybdenum-rich side, you get something like this, and you do that for the 3 regions, and if you use what's called the O'Donnell equation, which is used in thin film community to fit or to understand the phonon contribution for these peaks, or as a function of temperature, what phonons would do, you have something like this, and we use that to fit these peaks, and as you can see, the fits are reasonable, from which you can get the phonon contribution to the shift of the peaks as a function of temperature. However, you cannot do that for these other 3 peaks. So that gives us another confirmation that the 3 peaks are related to exciton-related excitations, whereas these are not. We cannot fit this with this equation, so they're vacancy-related peaks. So very simple spectroscopy results, completely far-field, showed you that these kinds of samples allow you to twin the band gap from about 1 eV range from the center to the edge, and these sulfur monovacancy-related peaks play a role in the spectra. And this may allow for some advanced device application. So with that, I'm going to open the floor for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for an interesting talk and being perfectly on time. So we have definitely some time for questions, comments.
I know the sample may be grown by others, but do you know how the gradient, the variation is actually introduced in the growth and how controllable it is? Can you create some patterns?
Yeah, that's a good question. The sample was made by Mauricio's group at Penn State, and it's very challenging to do that kind of control. But overall, you can see this density changing, the content changing. But I'm not sure in terms of how controllable that's in the atomic scale. It's a CVD grown sample, so you have some level of control, but I'm not the right person to answer that.
Okay, thank you. Some other questions? Anyone? Maybe just a short one. So on the very last slide, you have shown the temperature dependence of the position of the peaks, and you assign it to some contribution of phonons.
Yeah.
So alternatively, have you tried to analyze the data by some alternative models which are describing the temperature dependence of the band gap or some disorder? So is there any difference if you are going to this like 50-50 ratio of the tungsten and molybdenum? So if you can just briefly comment on that.
Whether we use another model, no. This is O'Donnell model is what we used, and it comes with different versions, you're right. And we found out this is appropriate for us.
Yeah. But there is, so far, seems to be there is no dramatic difference if you are to molybdenum or tungsten-rich side compared to the alloys where we are like in...
Yeah, no, you can fit all of them. That's what's interesting. Yeah. The other interesting thing is the fact that you cannot fit the ones that are coming from these monovacancies. Defect-related peaks cannot be fitted on this. And I think a model to explain that would be very useful, but we don't have one at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much.